Sarah, would you give me some instructions whether we should go ahead and start?
Yes, please. I was just waiting for you. Wasn't sure if you were already online. Yes, I think we can go ahead and start. We have the participants and our rapporteurs here with us, and we are good to go.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Sarah. Colleagues, welcome back to this session. I think it was a very lively discussions in the breakout groups. They were really quite long breakout groups, but at least my observation has been that it's been very, very lively. A lot of discussions in both breakout groups, both on the different questions that were being addressed in this conference. So, of course, more on the issues related to the instruments to be implemented in order to address the issues of both breakout groups. Also, with regards to the best practices that were shared by different stakeholders, lessons learned and recommendations for civil society engagement, and of course also the role of civil society implementation of these recommendations. So I think this have been really very good discussions. We have with us the rapporteurs who have been helping us to document the discussions of these two breakout groups. And for breakout group number 1, we have Tobias, Angela, Julia, and Monica, who are going to take us through the summary or give us a summary of that breakout group. And then for the other breakout group, we will have Aruni, Ivy, Eddie, and Danny, who are also then going to take us through the discussions of that breakout group. So each of the group will have about 30 minutes for the recap / summary, and then after that we could also or during that discussion we could also invite the participants in those sessions to share some additional information on that. So without further ado, I would ask Tobias, Angela, Julia, and Monica to take the floor and give us a summary of breakout group number 1.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Billy. So I'm Julia D'Amico. I'm rapporteur for breakout session number 1 on drug use and crime among youth. I'm here today with my other colleague rapporteurs to give you a brief description of today's and yesterday's discussion in our breakout group. Yesterday, we discussed existing instruments to address challenges on crime and drug use prevention among youth. We had some incredibly valuable speakers, and we all engaged in a variegated and multidisciplinary discussion. We also gained some key practical examples on how to prevent drug use and crime among youth. Today, instead, we discussed promising practices and actions for crime and drug use prevention among youth. The speakers highlighted some key insight on their practical experience and raised some major challenges that CSOs still have to face on a daily basis. So I will now hand it to my colleagues who will address the topic more in detail. Thank you so much for the attention.
So I will take over. Thank you, Julia, for your kind introduction. I've prepared some slides. So, Sarah, can you maybe activate so that I can
share? Should be done. You should be able to share.
So we had 3 presentations this morning, and the first was Barbara, and she highlighted investment, partnerships, and process. So to embrace the complexity that we don't try and simplify. So if it's simple, we already have a solution, and start with the understanding and to co-create a shared vision of what it looks like when it's fixed. And she also highlighted the opportunities for an intervention and said everyone is useful, especially the youth themselves. And also as an important aspect to identify partners who can share ownership and also accountability. The second speaker highlighted the challenges when it comes to CSOs and also general challenges. So, for example, there's a lack of knowledge on policy guidelines among some CSOs, or also a low involvement in policy making. When it comes to capabilities, there's a lack of resources, also weak partnerships, as already mentioned, and also a lack of disaggregated data on best practices. And last but not least, when it comes to voice and autonomy, there's a lack of structural and formalized consultation, and also a lack or a low involvement. And the third speaker, he focused on recommendations. So he mentioned that it's really important to create better access to counseling in schools, to offer proper training and development of life skills for youth, and as a really crucial aspect, adequate funding for establishing development structures. Also, as a next step, that there's a need for governments to increase the engagement of youth through recreation activities, and also promoting the implementation of laws and policies. And now I want to switch to the questions. In our breakout session, there was one question: are there comments on innovative funding? Then how do you believe instruments can be implemented to address the challenges youth face in regards to drugs and crime prevention? What are current best practices? And based on these challenges and best practices, what lessons learned and recommendations do you have? Then a really crucial aspect, how do we engage governments? Are they successful or unsuccessful examples? And how can we look at the various risk factors as well as at the protective factors? And to sum up, I want to show some answers from our discussion. So Evie mentioned it's very important for CSOs that they get information about funds. Then Chris mentioned engaging government is not easy. It's a lot about trust and dialogue. Then there was one comment from Aliyah. We need the governments to create more rehabilitation centers in Cameroon, for example. And when it comes to risk factors, Barbara mentions that we need to get an agreement for partnerships, so that we get away from fear and scarcity and really come to a valuable partnership. And Benjamin presented the prevention principles in our discussion session. And last but not least, Barbara highlighted that we really have to understand the social problems within a community. So in a nutshell, the questions and also some answers from our discussion. So does any rapporteur want to add something to my summary?
Can I come in now?
Yes, please go ahead. Are you one of the rapporteurs?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, greetings of the day. Okay, yesterday, one of the things that was pointed out was that drug use and crime is what commonly affects young people in Kenya. Then Brian talked about how his organization has been able to come up with policies in partnership with NACADA. They came up with policies for schools, national guidance for alcohol and drug use prevention. Then family, government, and family and government and people, they all came together for policies. Then there's life skill, they developed toolkits which will address drug use among young people. Currently said they are working with 24 schools, caregivers. While Sylvia talked about the laws that they focus on the laws of the land and the instrument for tools to address substance use and crime. Then they also partner with communities, schools, and law enforcement to ensure that all these are achieved. And part of their curriculum has to do with mentorship, as in they mentor young people that they don't get into crime. And one aspect they also bring people that have previously served. The word is offenders, but I don't think that's a nice word. People that have served before to like share their testimonies to say, I did this crime, I did the time, it's not worth it. You don't have to walk that path that I've walked, like to share success stories. Then that organization also partner with NACADA. Then Amy talked about the bovine prevention courses where you can give life skill prevention education to children. That the focus is not majorly on drugs, but the focus is on prevention education, focusing on personal and social skills, where children will be equipped with skills that when they encounter, as in they encounter, how would I say, opportunities to use drugs, they're already skilled that they can say no to drugs, that they don't have to make that decision of using drugs. And one of the questions that came up during Amy deliberation was like bovine skills and bovine life skills. They are very, how would I say, they are quality evidence-based intervention that shows that it has worked. From their report that over 50 countries, 50 states in Americas have carried out this. Over 3 million students have gone through this. Over, I think, is it 60,000 teachers, or a good number of teachers have been trained on this. However, looking at the cost of that, training, and considering the socio-economic status of African countries, the price is too much. That is there any way that these courses can be, how would I say, they can have waivers so people can have access to this course? And the lady from South Africa, I think Emma emphasized that to say, how do we apply this in the local content to see how it can work best in our own locality? That's it. Then they also talked about, so those who are already, then there's a senior person from UNODC, I'm sorry I didn't capture his name here, but it was in my report. He talked about treatment, the importance of treatment for people in incarceration. And one shocking thing that was exposed yesterday was that he said a good number of persons go into prison without having the HIV virus or the hepatitis C virus. However, these persons coming out from prison were infected with this virus. And he also mentioned that women are more affected, as in the number of women that are incarcerated for drug use in prison are more than men. And he also talked about that drug treatment is not like a drug that you can administer. I talked about the importance of psychotherapy, that it goes, medication and psychotherapy goes a long ways. And he also said that drug use disorder is a chronic relapsing condition that does not have a cure. But what you do is that you can give treatment and you keep empowering the person to stay focused, to stay positive, to stay off drugs. It's not something that if the person has been treated before and the person suffered a relapse, you abandon the person. No, you keep giving treatment. Then you talk that okay, the people who use drug are full-time more than, okay, so the people who use drug, they are more in the community. How do you say it? The people who use drug are full-time more than in the community. Okay, I think I've captured that. Okay. Then he gave examples of the Tokyo and Bangkok rule, meaning that people that are in prison, they have right to quality treatment. We shouldn't just say because they are in prison that we should ignore them. Okay. So it was also observed that Kenya, when it comes to drug treatment and prevention in Africa, Kenya is leading in Africa, that Kenya has gone a long way, that treatment should be affordable, treatment should be accessible. And these are gaps in Africa. We really do not have treatment centers. They are not, though we have few, but they are highly priced and they are not affordable. So there should be something that should be affordable. People can walk in to access treatment. Then one thing that featured a lot yesterday was the darknet on how drugs are sold on the internet, their social media pages, their messengers, and that drug is commonly trafficked through the dragnet. Then there was something that was very surprising yesterday, which I wish we can do in Nigeria. That in Kenya, in their various county, they have regulations of how they control harmful consumption of alcohol, and we don't have this yet. One common problem we have in Nigeria is availability of drug use. I mean, substance use. You go all over Nigeria, you just see sales of alcohol all over, no regulation, no control. So in Kenya, they said different counties have been able to regulate that. Then more treatment centers. This should be community-based, so people can walk in, just like somebody having malaria, the person can go in for treatment. Somebody having drug use dependency or disorder can also access treatment. They said government and CSOs, they need to work together in partnership, as in that the duty bearers, no one should be left behind. Then there was another thing that came from the discussion among the Kenya participants. I think that should be for Brian, the ability of them to engage children, that children have been given a voice in Kenya, to the extent that they formed a parliament and they wrote petition to the government, I think, listen to us, hear what we are saying. We are the population that is mostly affected by this challenge. Okay, then I think this is the lady from the crime, whatever, I can't remember her name now. I think the crime they saw, meaning in English, which means that crime is not cool. I can't remember the name in French. The lady talked about how they give psychosocial support, how they mentor. Then, okay, let me see. Okay, I've captured this, sorry. Then life skill keeps coming up. The importance of life skill, that life skill training should be given to persons, because this has to do with the individual, personal and developmental goal. There was something that was mentioned yesterday, that drug use problem is a developmental problem. So when designing intervention for people involved for prevention, the developmental stages should be taken into consideration. That is where the UNODC, ISOP, the WHO international standard came in, that we should always work with that document in course of developing program. That drug is not, saying no to drug, yet it works for some people, but it does not really work for others. That scare tactics is not the way out. Rather, people should be given, people should be empowered with skills. So collaboration came in from Amy from South Africa, said that oftentimes when CSOs, when they collaborate, they really do not understand they are coming together, and oftentimes because they don't understand themselves, there are a lot of disagreement. Sometimes some of these CSOs are at the point in time even sue the government because of the problem arising from that. So, but there is a need for partnership and understanding, as let there be a clear message to the reason why they've come together, the problems that they're looking, and the solution they want to profile to that. Thank you. I think I should stop here now.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Angela, for let's say, recapping also yesterday's discussion. So kind of taking us a little bit back to remind us about what we saw yesterday, because all these sessions are connected, right? So kind of building from one session to another. So it was good to have that summary as well. So thanks so much to you and Tobias for your input here. We still have a few minutes for your session summary, basically. So does any of the other...
Yeah, Billy, may I?
Yeah, Monica, please come in here.
Yeah, thanks. Just for a few key points of discussion. Considering that we were talking about a long-term process referred to prevention and treatment of drug addiction also, and we can consider that as someone said so well, that is a long process by the definition of drug addiction, that it's a chronic relapsing disease. And for that reason, we need to provide systemic approaches that deal with the complexity of vulnerability, creating better lives for young people, as Angela was saying so cool now, and empowering life skills and opportunities for them, of course. At the end of our day today, we said that we need to humanize this process. We need to be more emotional and empathic, and not just considering the scientific data that we have. And of course, we need to be operative and practical. The engagement of youth and their families as key settings of prevention with the communities need an holistic approach that is working better. And of course, we need to aggregate all the information that we are sharing during these days. And of course, during our life works, we need to share all the links and presentation, but we need to connect all the several projects that are aiming to the same topic. We are not idle, as someone said. We live in a society that connects us, and we need to co-create and co-product better than before. We got many common points and complementaries that are connecting us also now, and is relevant according to our shared challenges and shared solution for that. So fostering synergies, considering private sector and not governments as enemies too. So it was our final remarks today. So thank you so much also for other colleagues, and we are at disposition.
And thanks so much, Monica, as well, for that additional information. I think, one of the things that keeps coming up as well is that, that these solutions should be long-term. They require a lot of analysis, require a lot of persistence in terms of providing services to the vulnerables, and therefore also speaks to the question that was also raised yesterday, the issue of funding for the organizations that are doing this work. So, because if they are to do it well, if they are to do it sustainably, they need, of course, sustainable funding as well. And this funding seems to be one of the main challenges, especially when you think about one of the other issues that I think it was Barbara who mentioned, of course, also the need to do analysis of these problems before you carry out interventions. So there's a lot of work that goes into prevention as well in that particular case, and therefore requiring quite a lot of resources in order to do this sustainably. So thanks to the team for this comprehensive summary of breakout group number 1. We still have about 10 minutes for this summary. So I would like to invite people who, the participants who were in this session, breakout group number 1, and this is on promising practices and actions on organized crime. Sorry, this is on promising practices and action for crime and drug use prevention among youth. So those people who participate in this session, I would invite you to also make some comments if there's anything you would like to add to the summary that has just been provided, or if there's any further information you would like to add from your experience, the takeaways from the session, anything you would like to add to the summary that has just been provided. So the floor is open. You could raise your hand. You could, of course, use the chat as well to put any information in there. Or if you still have a question that anyone should respond to, this is also a moment for that as well. And also, I would also like to invite people who participate in breakout group number 2 as well, who find this discussion interesting in any way, or who would have something to add to that, any contribution to add to the discussion in breakout group, any reaction to that, any comment, you're also free to do that. And Sarah and others, perhaps they could help me to see if anyone is raising their hand.
Yes, Billy, there is a comment in the chat.
There's a comment in a chat. And it's from who? Do you know from who?
Yes, from Emma.
From Emma. All right, Emma, I see Emma is writing, I'm on the view that broken homes as well as single parenting is one of the major cause for drugs, perhaps major causes for drug use among youth. I think this was mentioned quite extensively yesterday by Wadi from UNODC when he presented this family skills program that UNODC is implementing. I think then Emma also spoke to this particular topic yesterday. Many speakers, I think, came back to this topic that home is a very important starting point for providing support to young people. So absolutely, I think I agree with you, Emma, on this. Absolutely, I think, therefore, there's a need also to do more at the family level, looking at those, let's say, key stakeholders in a family, such as you say, single parents, for example, to make sure that services could be provided to them. I see Esther and Julia would also like to intervene. I would like to invite perhaps Esther first.
Thank you. Well, I would like to say that in Kenya, I would say that in Kenya there is.
If I could ask Bello to mute himself or herself, I'm not sure. Please
Okay,
go
thank
ahead.
you. Okay, I would like to say in Kenya there is a missing gap that I feel that the organization should use. For example, their polytechnics, the government polytechnics that we have. I think it's an avenue that we can advocate so that they can be upgraded to be able to handle the current changes that we have in terms of technology and also the mode of the skills they teach, because most of those polytechnics, they tend to embrace the old fashion of that for the people to attend, they have to wear school uniform, which affect or makes many youths not to love to attend them, because they are running from a primary school uniform. Now the polytechnics they are expected to join, which are cheap and they have the skills they want. They advocate for use of school uniforms. So I think that is one avenue that we can use in creating life skills and try to advocate so that these polytechnic can be able to change their mode of how they approach issues in terms of how they take their courses and also how the expectation of the student, so that they can be able to capture so many youths and be able to build capacity for the youths. Thank you, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Esther, for that contribution, again, bringing in to the table back this issue of life skills and the importance of that, and also tapping into the existing instruments or existing opportunities also at the state level, in this case, in Kenya. Thank you for that. Julia, please come in.
Thank you so much, Billy. I really enjoyed all the presentation during these days in our breakout group number 1 on drug use and crime. But there was one that I found very, very interesting and relevant, which was the presentation by Chris from the African Youth Initiative on Crime Prevention. He focused on the importance of sport and recreational spaces, that because he reported some very low percentages of drug users among sport teams. where he actually lived. So I found it very interesting, the fact that we should put more emphasis on recreational centers, because I really think they are a hotspot that highly prevent young kids from drug use and crime. So I think this is very important. This is a topic that is not very often addressed. So the crucial role of sport and recreation centers in preventing youth from drug use and crime. So thank you so much, Chris, and thank you so much all the other presenters.
Thank you, Julia, as well for that. I mean, of course, many of you would be aware of the work of UNODC on providing recreational services to young people through the E4J program, which is being phased out right now, but there will be a new program. Some of you might be aware of the GRACE initiative, which is the one coming up. So there's been quite a lot of work done within the E4J project. And in fact, I think there will be a continuation of that particular angle of the E4J, focusing more on creating recreational opportunities for young people. Thank you, Julia, for that contribution. Then I see Sandra and then Isao. So I'll start with Sandra and then Isao, please. Sandra, you're muted.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like to also add my point. Yesterday, well, I've noted a point which was raised by the other colleagues. As CSOs, we have to focus on addressing preventive measures of drug abuse and crime, and also that prevention is beyond awareness raising. Just saying no to drugs is not enough. We have to develop the individuals so that they learn life skills. I thank you.
Thanks so much, Sandra, for emphasizing that point, which was really made very much clear yesterday as well throughout different presentations, that we have to do more than just saying that drugs or crime is bad. You have to provide other services, alternative services, especially to the vulnerable groups in general. So advocacy is not enough. Life skills is one of those, let's say, long lasting intervention that one can provide amongst many other things. Thank you, Sandra, for that. Isao?
Thank you so much. Yeah, perhaps I would also like to reiterate on some points that have been said, especially on the issue of parenting. You realize that some people actually come from very conservative homes. So you realize such homes whereby it is highly prohibited to even be in possession of any alcoholic materials like bottles, etc., etc., etc. And so you realize that sometimes there comes disconnection between the children and their parents, especially in such home setups. So when these students go to schools, especially in higher learning institutions, now that is the point for them to test and to see those things that they are being prohibited to do. So I think in parenting, parents should also take such roles, be intentional in their relationship with their children, so that as much as they are conservative, as much as they put these restrictions for their children, they should also make it in a way that children can also live freely with them, so that even if they get outside there away from them, they are not tempted to test these things. Then again, something that I must also recommend that I've also seen in some higher learning institutions in Kenya. I know of a few universities and colleges who have actually implemented the issue of alcohol and substance abuse in the curriculum. For instance, there's a university in Kenya called Dedan Kimathi University of Technology in Kenya here, whereby for all fresh students, all first years, there's a common unit for them, that a common unit on alcohol and substance abuse. That's meant that unit, in other words, all students who join the university in their first years is a must for them to do that unit. And again, other universities like KC University have also implemented the same. So perhaps if our higher learning institutions can also implement such things, such curriculum, so that our students are not left on their own because of the freedom that we hear or are there in our universities, they can also get to be informed of these things. So I'd highly recommend that these things to be also incorporated in our higher learning institutions, and also our parents, should also consider and find a way on how they can relate with their children in a way that they're not so much restricted that gives them some burden when they get outside there. So thank you.
Thank you, Isao, for bringing in that, let's say, kind of two-sided of education, the importance of education on these topics, both, of course, the informal one starting at home with parents. I think, again, re-emphasizing that. And I think it's very important that you bring in the idea to bring these issues at the school level, university level, maybe, not necessarily at university level only, but certainly also even really from the primary school level, secondary school level. So the earlier you can start, the better it would be, especially when you're talking about young people. So thanks so much, Isao, for that. Angela, if you don't mind, I would come back to you at some point. But in the interest of time, we'll just move on to the next group, group number 2, which was more on discussing promising practices and actions on organized crime, cybercrime, and illicit trafficking. And here we have our colleagues, as I mentioned, Ayuni, Ivy, Eddie, and Danny, who are going to take us through the summary of this session. So, colleagues, you have the floor.
Oui, merci, merci Billy. Bonjour tout le monde. Je m'empresse de prendre la parole pour présenter le rapport du point 2. Nous avons effectivement ce matin, je vais commencer par le point de ce matin, nous avons ce matin discuté sur les bonnes pratiques, les meilleures pratiques en vue de prévenir et de réprimer la criminalité organisée, la cybercriminalité et les trafics illicites. Et nous avons eu au total 2 interventions, à savoir l'intervention de Dimasari et ensuite l'intervention de Luis Edouard. Dimasari, quant à elle, nous a fait le point sur la diplomatie numérique et l'importance du rôle de Microsoft sur le continent africain. En réalité, Microsoft qui offre des modules de formation en cybersécurité et qui est résolument engagé dans la lutte contre la cybersécurité sur le continent africain. Et comme point avec emphase, elle a évoqué justement la nécessité de collaboration avec l'ensemble des autres acteurs parce que, effectivement, à l'analyse, il ressort qu'aucun pays ne peut venir à bout tout seul du phénomène de la cybercriminalité transnationale. Ce d'autant plus que les chiffres présentés autour de cette cybercriminalité font preuve d'un phénomène en plein essor et qui appelle donc justement l'implication croissante de tous les acteurs intervenant dans la lutte contre la criminalité organisée et donc parmi lesquels les acteurs, les organisations de la société civile qui aujourd'hui occupent une place de choix. Elle a fini son propos en insistant sur quelques actions à mener. Je vais comme ça vous donner rapidement ces actions-là. Il s'agissait pour elle d'améliorer la cybersécurité, de renforcer la protection des données personnelles, mais aussi et surtout de sensibiliser et de renforcer les capacités sur la cybercriminalité. Donc, comme vous pouvez le constater, la question du renforcement des capacités revient Et peut-être pour préciser à Esao, tout à l'heure, comme il parlait des modules de formation, effectivement, dans le chat, on a le lien du programme Education for Justice, qui est un programme qui prend de l'école primaire en passant par le secondaire jusqu'au niveau universitaire pour effectivement proposer au corps enseignant des modules de formation en vue justement de prévenir et de renforcer les curricula de formation sur les thématiques de lutte contre la criminalité organisée, la corruption, la cybercriminalité, le trafic illicite des migrants et des personnes, le trafic des armes à feu, la lutte contre le terrorisme. Donc, pour finir son propos, effectivement, Dima relevait qu'il faudra penser à un renforcement de la coopération internationale et également penser au renforcement des capacités. Louise, quant à elle, nous a présenté l'engagement de la société civile avec le cas spécifique des réponses en Afrique du Sud, ce qui est de la lutte contre la criminalité organisée. Et justement, dans son propos, il était question de voir quels sont les mécanismes mis en place, aussi bien par la justice criminelle que par la justice non criminelle, pour effectivement, avec les communautés de développement, avec les organisations régionales, apporter une solution durable à la lutte contre la criminalité organisée. Et pour ce faire, elle, effectivement, a mentionné l'approche participative qui devrait intégrer une dimension bilatérale, multilatérale, avec effectivement à la clé des acteurs nationaux pour le développement des stratégies de riposte contre le crime et la violence. Elle a également insisté sur l'augmentation de notre résilience quant au phénomène de la criminalité transnationale organisée. Et donc, pour elle, les acteurs de la société civile pourraient davantage contribuer à la question de la lutte contre la criminalité organisée en contribuant effectivement à l'élaboration des lignes directrices qui pourront être proposées au gouvernement afin effectivement de leur apporter le soutien qui convient pour juguler la question du crime et de la violence. Et pour revenir à la journée d'hier, pour ce qui était de notre sous-groupe, effectivement, nous avons eu principalement trois intervenants. Nous avons d'abord eu Annabella qui nous a présenté le projet ENACT, qui également est une plateforme permettant de combattre le crime organisé en proposant des techniques d'amélioration des enquêtes à travers les échanges d'informations, à travers le renforcement des capacités, à travers la production des rapports. Et donc, à la suite de cette présentation du projet ENACT, elle a essayé de décliner les différents acteurs intervenant dans le trafic des organes. Elle a également présenté les différents modes opératoires qu'on a pu identifier dans le trafic des organes, avant effectivement d'insister sur l'impact de la COVID-19 dans le trafic illicite des organes. Et elle a souligné effectivement que cet impact était d'abord socio-économique et effectivement l'autre impact était le recours à la cybercriminalité par ces criminels d'une autre nature pour effectivement recruter les victimes qui vont subir des actes illicites de transfert d'organes. Et elle a terminé son propos justement en insistant une fois de plus sur la nécessité de renforcer la coopération entre les différents acteurs. Mais également, elle a souligné que l'autre défi majeur est le fait qu'au sein chacun des États concerne suffisance qu'on a pu relever de part et d'autre dans le cadre juridique. Et c'est donc par ces insuffisances-là que Mme Judy Kaberia a pris la parole pour effectivement présenter l'absence de protection même des migrants. Elle a pris le cas de la loi kenyane, elle a pris le cas de la loi en Tanzanie, qui effectivement laisse encore entrevoir des failles quant à la protection des migrants. Et davantage, cette absence de protection des migrants a une fois été de plus relevée durant la pandémie de la COVID-19. Et donc, après avoir fait le tour de la présentation de la question, elle a essayé de proposer quelques actions à mener. Au rang de ces actions, elle est restée beaucoup plus dans son profil de journaliste de formation. Elle a pensé qu'on devrait davantage mettre un accent sur la communication. Effectivement, cette communication devrait permettre à terme de mettre tous les acteurs en harmonie sur les différentes tendances de la criminalité relevée au sein de la société. Et donc, parce que les jeunes sont les plus impliqués dans la cybercriminalité, il est davantage désormais question de responsabiliser ces jeunes, comme il a été souligné lors de la plénière, pour leur permettre effectivement de prendre la mesure de la situation et de se prémunir des risques et des dangers de la criminalité transnationale organisée. Kwasi, le dernier intervenant d'hier, a essayé de décliner en 3 temps les instruments qui existent dans la lutte contre la criminalité organisée. Et donc, il a d'abord souligné au niveau international quels sont les textes qui existent en mettant en bonne place la Convention de Budapest et les différents textes pris par le Conseil de l'Europe. Au second palier, c'est-à-dire au niveau régional, il a relevé effectivement le cadre juridique élaboré au sein de l'UEMOA, parce qu'il est parti de l'exemple du Togo, lequel Togo appartient à l'UEMOA, à la CEDEAO. Il est parti donc de l'exemple du Togo pour effectivement présenter le cadre juridique de la réglementation de la lutte contre la criminalité transnationale organisée dans la sous-région. Et donc, il a terminé son propos en évoquant effectivement les textes qui sont pris au niveau local, où il vise justement le code pénal togolais, mais aussi une loi spécifique qui a été prise tout récemment en matière de lutte contre la cybercriminalité au Togo. Et cette loi qui a été votée en octobre 2018. Et le Togo qui a également ratifié des instruments existants pour une meilleure promotion de ces instruments internationaux. Au chapitre des échanges, quelques questions ont particulièrement retenu mon attention. Il s'agissait davantage de la question du mode de preuve ou alors de l'admission des preuves. Étant donné que l'activité de la cybercriminalité est une activité qui se déploie dans un monde virtuel et qui traverse allègrement les frontières des différents États, la question donc de l'admission, de l'administration des preuves s'est véritablement posée. Et donc, au cours des échanges, effectivement, on a pu comme ça relever quelques pistes de solutions sur l'admission, sur la réforme du cadre juridique permettant effectivement d'alléger le régime de la preuve pour effectivement donner plus d'outils aux acteurs chargés de l'application des peines dans la poursuite des infractions relatives à la criminalité transnationale organisée, à la cybercriminalité ou alors au trafic illicite sur le continent africain. Et au chapitre des défis, nous avons au sein du sous-groupe envisagé la question de la corruption qui effectivement semble innerver l'ensemble du processus criminel dans notre contexte et qui malheureusement plombe de façon drastique la lutte contre la criminalité organisée dans nos différents pays. Je vais comme ça rapidement laisser le soin à mes co-rapporteurs pour leur ajout. Je vous remercie pour votre bienveillante attention.
Merci beaucoup, Eddie, pour ce rapport très, très compréhensible. Alors, avant de donner la parole aux autres participants, je voudrais juste demander aux rapporteurs de SOCESO si ce sont d'autres points à ajouter. Alors, Ivy and the others, is there anything else you would like to add to what Eddie just comprehensively presented as a summary for this particular session?
Yes, Billy, I'd love to add some points that were raised today by Demasari. She actually raised a couple of actionable recommendations that I had pointed down, and I'll be able to share them later with Sarah. So I'll just go through them very quickly. So one of the points that she raised was that good cybersecurity fundamentals and cyber hygiene to guarantee the safe management of important data and network security. She also said that multilateral discussions are very important. She also stated that countries can rely on their existing national laws to combat organized crimes. She also raised the importance of cyber capacity building and expertise. And lastly, she stated that in order to have internet freedom, we need a legislative framework, but we do not need excessive internet control. On to the next speaker, Louise Edwards. She came up with the most profound notion that was expressed. She said that we need to look inwards to tackle organized crime challenges. And in the question and answer session that we had, there was a question that was raised that was talking about what strengths do Africa have concerning the fight against organized crime. And the answer was that Africa is improving at their regional collaborations and recognizing the challenges concerning organized crime, but we are still lacking in implementation support. So that was a very important point that I've stated here, and I'll be able to share it later. Other significant arguments that were raised includes that one, restorative justice is not an appropriate option for organized crime, but it should be provided as an alternative, especially if victims are willing to participate. Okay, so another point that was raised was an information forum is important for training and educating the youth and civil society, especially concerning organized crime. International instruments are very essential. And lastly, we need to protect ourselves as at individual levels by strengthening security. So those are the points that I was able to capture. And if there's any other colleague that has additional points, you're able to add on to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ivy, for that. I see, Danny, is there anything you would like to add?
Yes, yeah, a very few points. Especially regarding, some of the questions that that we were supposed to address during these discussions. For instance, regarding, what can be considered to be the best practices in Africa, in regard, about how to tackle the challenges posed by organized crime and cybercrime and all the illicit trafficking. I noted that regional cooperation and discussion was something that should be highlighted. One of the speakers insisted that in Africa we were particularly good at this, and that these were very useful, in developing standards and norms. But the same speaker also insisted that we are not so good at actually implementing those standards. So we are good at meeting, discussing, having them written down,
but that when it comes to application, there were still, effort were still needed. I also noted that what was not so good was that many countries in the region were sort of embarking on cybercrime law individually. They were going for national law instead of more regional framework. And it was noted that this could be detrimental, especially for African startups, as they are growing, to have to cope with all the regulation and all the countries' differences. Suggesting that ideally there should be a sort of regional approach, if not continental approach, so that it is easier for everybody to navigate the landscape. When it comes to the role of civil society, what civil society could do very specifically, I think Dimasari insisted on the necessity for the civil society to help in keeping internet free. I think one of the rapporteurs already said this. Louis Edwards, insisted that, pointed to some example of how civil society in the SADC has been very useful in identifying community needs and what role they could further play in ensuring that the institutional response to the issue of crime is demand driven. So really address the needs of the community. So this is what I can add on what has been said today. As for tomorrow, I think I can add a few things, especially when it comes to the main challenges linked to organized crime, cybercrime, and illicit trafficking in Africa. I think Eddie rightfully mentioned that COVID-19 socioeconomic impact came up a lot in the discussion yesterday. I think speakers also insisted on insufficient and inefficient information sharing mechanism, between law enforcement agencies and the medical sector. This came up when we were discussing the issue of organized crime for the human trafficking for the purpose of organ removal. So it came up that sometimes the medical sector had a lot of information that were not appropriately conveyed to law enforcement and the other way around. There was also the issue of lack of awareness among civil society organizations in many countries about specifically this type of crime, trafficking of human beings for the purpose of organ removal. So the idea being that civil society is somehow, lacking behind when it comes to awareness, to how serious this crime or this practice is. There were also discussion about the loopholes in all those mechanisms, all those existing mechanisms that are there to help fight organized crime. In North Africa, it was said that lack of appropriate description, of accurate description of some specific type of crime, was being exploited by criminals, by organized criminal groups. It was also mentioned that bodies in charge of regulation and of the fight against this crime are sometimes under-resourced. And of course, that criminals are changing strategies all the time, forcing them to also change their own strategies, which sometimes was a bit slower compared to that of criminals. In East Africa, the challenges were, what I wrote down was that capacity building was was a widespread practice there, but that was sometimes limited to capital. The idea being that law enforcement agents are trained in the capital. The example of Kenya came up. Law enforcement agents in Nairobi receive a lot of training, but those who are remote, who are in the countryside where most vulnerable victims live, sometimes do not receive the same capacity building. The idea of information sharing also came up. I think the speaker also mentioned the fact that there was a lack of awareness among young people, especially who embark in criminal activities, lack of awareness of the risk, of the consequences. And of course, there was the issue of law enforcement or powerful people being also part of the crime as brokers, as godfathers, which was, the speaker said, actually makes the work of journalists who want to report on this kind of crime even more dangerous, because it is something, to challenge criminal. It is something else to challenge, their godfather, who sometimes have state power or this kind of instrument. And another challenge in East Africa was, or perhaps in Africa in general, was I wrote shortage in trained and perhaps courageous journalists, who are not that many, and the few that who are there should somehow be supported. The speaker also insisted on finding ways to have stronger and bolder media capable of exposing organized crime, and also their powerful godfathers. So this is what I wrote down. When it comes to West Africa, some point that have not been mentioned yet is, for instance, the delay in the application of the law that the speaker said somehow discourages many victims. The issue of lawyers' fees that are sometimes very expensive, and that are also, factors that somehow discourage victims to even, start a case. And the speaker also mentioned social norms and family reluctance to bring some sort of, crime cases to the law. I mean, to the prosecutor, to the police. Preferring to deal with the matter within the family. So this is the issue of social norms, and So I will stop there, and perhaps I will, if there's any question, I could always add something. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danny, for that also additional information. We have, unless I know that there's in your group, there's also Iruni, unless there's something you would like to add to that, I would then give the floor. I see Iruni, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Billy. So hello, everyone. Hope you're well. I have nothing much to add up in what my colleagues have already eloquently elaborated about what happened in the breakout session too. However, I have a couple of things that I would like to highlight. So if I can just share my screen now. Let's see. Yes, are you able to see my screen?
We can see that.
That's nice. Thank you, Billy. So the things that keep on coming back to me is that what Dani Tiwa has mentioned, that there is a lack of awareness. So I think this is a reflection of the loophole in the mechanism put in place at the moment that doesn't reflect the essence of prevention science and localization of these instruments and tools in the youth setting. Because if you remember in our morning session yesterday, Mr. Carton Hall has eloquently described that the bridge between public health and criminal justice is the role of civil society to lay the cornerstone for prevention. But this is not prevention in the traditional sense of just raising awareness and teaching our youth to say no, just like what fellow rapporteur Angela Beccademo has mentioned, saying no is not enough. But another speaker on that day have mentioned that this is a prevention on the basis of science, and to humanize that in context, the prevention science is the prevention that meets the age of development as well as meeting the stage of vulnerabilities. So if you have a look at the main instruments and tools, the main challenges, it is still having that loophole that prevention science is not addressed. And to highlight this point.
Aruni, sorry to come in here. For some reason, I see Dr. Sadiq on my screen, not the presentation itself, or his presentation somewhere else. Is this just my issue, Sarah, or Are other people also seeing the same that I see?
No, I think
You can see the screen.
I
can see the
can
screen. Okay, excellent. Please go ahead.
Yes?
Please go ahead. Sorry, it must be on my side.
I'm sorry. So, so going back to the problem, the loophole there, there is one question that was being arised by by the audience, which is how to enhance localization of these efforts so local youth can relate and implement in their setting. And this was asked by Alfie in the morning session. So these are some of the loopholes, and it has already been discussed by my fellow colleagues. Just a little bit of addition there is that in the case of organ trafficking that was presented by Annabella, they have identified the modus operandi. She has highlighted 4 modus operandi, but still there is a lack of data on perpetrators and victims due to the complexity of the crime, and there is an intersection between the victims and the perpetrators themselves. But what they know is that the main targets by the organ sellers are vulnerable victims, especially the youth, because this is rational due to the quality of their organs. And at the same time, those that are the main targets are the migrants that are stranded along the smuggling routes. So I think that this is one of the main challenge, because these are exactly the vulnerable people that is really hard to reach, those that supposedly that we should rescue, we should help, but at the end of the day, it's very difficult to bring our communication, to bring our preventative measures to them. So the breakout session of today answers some of the gaps from yesterday. And if I can share with you my second slide. So first is the implementation of existing instruments and tools. So this was highlighted by the speaker, Louise Edward, from the African Policing Civilian Oversight Forum, APCOF. And she highlighted the Southern Africa Development Community Guidelines on Crime and Violence of 2018, which helped to strengthen governance and the development mechanisms. And she also mentioned the Bill of Rights, where the constitutional and human rights arguments can be taken into the national context. And what is very nice is that there are a lot of examples on current best practices in Africa, also highlighted by Louise Edward. And this helps to set the standards at a regional level. And I leave a link here to all of their previous projects, which I feel could be helpful to all of us. And what is they are very good at, which has already been mentioned by other rapporteurs, is that they are very good at strengthening the policing mechanism on public order management, as well as promoting community safety in terms of community safety audits and planning. And lastly, are the actionable goals for civil society engagement. She highlighted that as opposed to a top-down approach, it should be a community-based and community-owned approach, and it should be a widespread engagement, which is inclusive and participatory. And in order for civil society organizations to be successful in their engagement, it is also important to identify the hotspots to focus to vulnerable groups. So like I did in the previous slide, where I highlighted questions from the audience, in our second breakout session today, there was one, not actually a question, but actually an opinion raised by my fellow rapporteur, which is by Eddie Nerfu, is that he mentioned that the main challenges are corruption, absence of data, and law enforcement capacity building. So law enforcement capacity building was touched a little bit yesterday and also today. The absence of data, as we all know, this is one of the main challenges, and it is still in progress. However, the issue of corruption is not in any way mentioned in today's breakout session. But I think it was touched yesterday by Dima. So that concludes my repertoire finding. Thank you all, and I shall pass the time back to Billy. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rooney, for that presentation. Sorry, I had some trouble seeing your slides, but I captured everything that you mentioned. So thank you so much to you and to the other rapporteurs of this session. I think it was really an interesting session that is a complex session, I have to say. I mean, when you look even at the title of the session itself, it covers basically everything, you know, organized crime, cybercrime, illicit trafficking. It's a lot of things in all of that. And I'm glad that you really captured many aspects related, of course, to organized crime in general, organ trafficking, migrant smuggling, so many aspects of the discussion. And so I'm really thankful to you as a rapporteurs, to your moderator, of course, Sarah Simons, and I think together with Mr. Farai Magu as well in that session, and of course to the previous moderators of the moderators of the previous sessions, and that is Benjamin and Emmy or Emma as well. So thank you so much for this. I would just like to, before I pass the floor to the audience for reactions and some questions, I just want to get some guidance from Sarah because the program tells me that we still have time. Is that correct, Sarah?
Yes, Billy, you still have time. And just to also draw your attention, I believe that Dr. Simons raised her hand. To also make an intervention here on her session.
Excellent. So could you guide me how much time we still have for this session?
Yes. We still have until, until 4 p.m. Until 10 to 4 p.m. So until 15:45.
15:45, this is Nairobi time. This is 13:45 Vienna time.
So you still have about 10-15 minutes.
10-15 minutes. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for that guidance, Sarah. And then, of course,
apologies, Billy. That's my mistake. We are only at 12:32 our time right now, and you'll have until 1:45 p.m.
All right, so I have quite plenty of time. This is great because I think there's quite a lot of other contributions that will come from the audience. And of course, let me start with the with Sarah Simons here first. And then I would also, what I would like to do is to go back to the previous moderators as well, the moderators of the previous session, Benjamin and Emma, to also ask them for their own comments and reactions to this. So, Sarah, please go ahead.
Mine is a very brief one sentence, just because one of the rapporteurs in my session was pointing out some very key areas that were discussed when it came to challenges. And one that was mentioned by Louise is the fact that, as my colleague mentioned, one of our strengths is we're good at regional cooperation. But that posed a challenge because Louise said that regional cooperation is actually taking a back step. It's being deprioritized in the interest of focusing resources and attention on national threats. So yes, we have the instruments and so on, But in terms of implementation, countries are focusing more on tackling regional threats. So in view of those two, she mentioned the need for harmonization of national and regional laws to avoid this deprioritization of regional efforts to focus on national efforts. That's all I wanted to add. I'll give the rest in my moderator's summary tomorrow.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Sarah, for that additional comment as well. Obviously, especially, I think, as I mentioned yesterday, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic, I think we have certainly seen that a lot of countries have started to look more inward to address their own challenges, of course, in relation to COVID-19. But if you look closer, you will see that that has led to, let's say, a wider inward-looking approach by several states. So that, of course, putting at risk, I think, a lot of efforts and investments that would otherwise go into regional and international cooperation, which is very key to addressing the very issues that we're discussing at this conference, organized crime, drug trafficking, but of course, we're of course talking about much more than that. So thanks so much for that comment, Sarah. And with that, I would also like to invite the other moderators to make any comment. I know that you will have the opportunity to summarize tomorrow, but if you have any other comments, anything to add to the summaries of the groups. So I would ask Benjamin and Emma if they have any comments. If they are with us.
Billy, I don't think that Benjamin and Emma were able to join this plenary session due to other commitments, but they will be here tomorrow in the plenary to give their summaries.
Excellent, that's absolutely fine. So thanks so much for that guidance, Sarah. So let me then go back to the audience. I mean, obviously you all participated in these two sessions. Especially let's start with the second session to invite those who participated in this session to react and make comments, any additional information to the summary that has been provided. So as before, of course, raise your hand, put anything in a chat. Sarah, please do help me also to see if there are any questions in the chat that we need to address as well.
So there were several comments in the chat, Billy, also already during the recap of the rapporteurs. And a recent comment is, for example, from Sandra from Zimbabwe that I found very interesting, linking also the organized crime and the lack of reporting to corruption and low income from reporters and other people in key functions. So I think that was a very interesting point made by Sandra. Perhaps she would like to say a bit more on that. Then we've also had a comment from Nigeria, but I think Bello already left, saying that also often drug use disorders are very common among sex workers and women in situations where they need to sell their bodies. So those are kind of the most recent comments. And I see that two participants now raised their hands, Angela and Danny.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Sarah, for that. I see also there's a comment from Farida, who is, I think, joining us from Mombasa with other groups. And I think they're saying that our young ones, making reference to the young people, are highly on Mugoka. I'm not sure what that is. Mugoka? What is that, a Swahili word? I'm not really sure what that means. But maybe those Swahili speaking people could help me what that means. Understanding Is that something you could help us with, Sarah? What is Mugoka?
Hi, Mogoka is a psychoactive stimulant.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So she said, okay.
Cat is KHAT.
I see. So she's basically saying that Harry on that, which has high mental health issues, but the government use it as a legal business without considering the effects, and the government basically is, of course, let's say, undermining the lives of those young people. So thank you for that comment from Mombasa. So Benjamin, you're back, but I gave you the floor and you were not around. So I think I will bring you back at some point, but I would like to go to Angela because she raised her hand quite early. and then I will go back to Danny and I come back to you, Benjamin, at some point. Angela, please.
Yeah, thank you, Billy. I want to talk about government not being supportive to prevention, intervention, and drug use disorder treatments in Nigeria. I want to talk about it from the perspective of lack of understanding and corruption, and I will add education to it. This I will explain. The Nigerian society, a good number of persons do not see drug use as a health issue. They judge it more from the moral perspective to say, okay, you use drug, you brought this upon yourself, you should deal with it. Then corruption, I want to look at it from both ways, from the government and from the CSOs. If we look at the early histories of intervention in Nigeria, a good number of CSOs lack integrity and accountability. Funds have been released number of times. Do they carry out this the intervention these funds were meant for? A good number of them do not do the work. What they did was that they just did a shoddy job, take pictures, send reports without proper intervention of those. And all these are there. So the Nigerian government is also looking at, oh, if we give you the money, what are you going to do? Is it not business as usual? So this now brings us to education. We need to really explain to the Nigerian society to say drug use and drug use disorder is a global problem. It's not only dealt by the Nigerian society, and it has been on from time immemorial. Man will always use drugs. But will everybody develop this problem? No, some would, some would not. But those that will, we don't know, because science said it depends on your gene, your environmental factors, and different things. So those that have developed this problem, can we look at them? Can we also prevent the risk factors making people to use? With proper education, I think CSO carrying out more advocacies, having integrity on their part. I think government we can work in partnership with government. And one thing with the Nigerian society is that if something is not, how would I say it, out of control, we have a government that does not really take things into consideration. Like why Nigerians decide to show interest into drug use. It was the last data that was released from the UNODC on the statistics when it said 14.4 million persons have used drugs in a lifetime in Nigeria. So it was shocking for the Nigerian society to say, oh, we have this problem. Even with the codeine buzz, when they discovered that lots of youths are dependent on codeine. So these are the things. So with education, advocacies, as in educating people in the stakeholders, the influencers to say drug use is a health problem that needs to be tackled. It's not a moral failing by the individual. It's not a moral failing by the society. So how can we correct this thing? I think with that, if governments have better understanding of this problem, they will support prevention, treatment, and recovery intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela, again for that contribution. I guess giving a specific example of how this manifests itself in Nigeria, the issue of corruption, as other colleagues have mentioned already, but also the issue of stigma and stigmatization. I could not pronounce this word yesterday. I've been practicing. stigmatization. And this is what Angela was mentioning yesterday. How can we find a balance between stigmatizing drugs and not stigmatizing drug users? And exactly the point that you're making in Nigeria, basically, people think if you are doing using drugs, it's your problem. It's you know, you brought this to yourself, and that brings in more problems, of course, for those people who use drugs. And also, I think that has an impact on how those people are treated by the justice system in that particular country. As you said, you bring in corruption, it becomes even a bigger problem. So thank you so much for that contribution. Angela, Dania, bring you in, and then I would go to Dr. Sadiq Amani. Dania, please.
Thank you very much, Billy. I just wanted to stress a point that seems important to me when it comes to prevention, you know, with respect to drug use specifically. And I'm saying this now because I was part of the second breakout session, so I could not, you know, make a case for my idea. The idea is very simple. Is to say that we should probably double down, you know, on the research side of all these issues, because it is very difficult to actually address a problem that you don't understand. And what I have in mind is a very simple question, which is what makes drug use attractive to young people in the first place? I mean, before it becomes a health problem, or is, you know, this kind of, because the person has become addicted, there must be serious reflection about, you know, on the issue of how do people, you know, get into this in the first place. And I think the way to be able to answer this question is to commit to more in-depth, you know, studies of youth subculture, you know, how the young people see themselves, how they gather, what is important to them, how they you know, they interact with the society in terms of meaning, in terms of, you know, asserting their own position, their own cultural views. I think this is where we can understand better, you know, how people are dragged into drug use and be in the position to prevent, you know, many more people to actually entering into this vicious cycle. So I want to insist that we should, and this is in part why the reason why we created the African Center for Crime and Security Studies in Cameroon, because we realized very quickly that people that are in charge of addressing these issues there were not aware of the vast amount of knowledge that is produced in criminology, especially in critical criminology. You know, I mentioned the idea of how drugs become attractive to young people. I mean, there's a branch of criminology, cultural criminology, that can bring a lot of interesting new perspectives on these issues, and that can be very useful in starting to address the problem. You know, but in vast part of Africa, and you will realize first that, for instance, in Cameroon, there's not such a thing as criminology as a discipline. You know, people are trained as police officers, you know, from the day one to the end of their training. They are not given any substantial training on, you know, theories of crime, or on, you know, this kind of stuff. Not going to mention new perspectives in criminology like critical criminology, this kind of stuff. I think this is something that should be reversed if you want to have a generation of experts, you know, that have a better understanding of the dynamics of these things, you know. And so this is the point that I wanted to stress. The importance of research, but not just data in the sense of statistical data in the sense, but really deep understanding, you know, of the subculture of people who are embarking or are joining organized criminal groups, or are embarking on drug use for recreative purposes or for other type of purposes. You know, we need this deep understanding. Otherwise, we will still be on the backseat. We will still be behind. You know, we will still be running after something that probably started before we even realize it is there. So yeah, I will stop there, and perhaps there will be a more appropriate forums, you know, to kind of discuss this kind of, I mean, how we can push this type of agenda forward.
Thanks so much, Danny, for that. I think this is, for me, one of the most important questions that the conference should also consider moving forward. I think it was emphasized yesterday by Angela that one of the reasons why we do not fully understand the links between these two phenomena is because there's a significant lack of data when it comes to the African continent. So how can this be addressed? We know that at UNODC there are a lot of efforts for governments to provide data, a lot of efforts for civil society organizations to contribute data, but still the issue remains. And therefore, I think this really needs to be a serious consideration as to how that can be improved. And hopefully this will be one of the recommendations that will be made from this conference. And that could be followed through later on by the conference and the conference participants moving forward. So thanks, Danny, for that. And his point was, by the way, again, emphasized by a number of speakers saying, making reference to research and analysis, right? In the context of designing interventions and projects and so on. So again, this is I think it's a very, very important point, a very important intervention, and also an important outcome of this discussion, also taking the discussion and the conversation forward. So thank you, Danny, for that. I would then right now like to invite Dr. Sadiq Amali to, Dr. Sadiq, I see now you have your hand up as well. Please, the floor is yours. You are muted. We cannot hear you, you are muted.
Hello, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Also, I belong to a non-governmental organization in Nigeria called Initiative for Community Action Against Drug Abuse. And what we try to do is to conduct researches on the level of drug or substance abuse by youths, largely in northern Nigeria. But what is surprising now that the issue of drug abuse or substance abuse has now gone beyond the issue of youth, to the extent that even married women are involved in it. But due to the culture in northern Nigeria, one may not be able to probe into these instances or this occurrence of substance abuse amongst married women. So we need to, sometimes we don't really get to know what is the cause, because sometimes, like in the case of married women, due to marital problems, you understand, they get into depression, and then the last resort is substance abuse. So now it has now moved from issue of maybe youths or maybe even highly placed individuals who take more sophisticated substances, and then the married women. And so I think the government has to come up with a strategy on how to see how attention can be shifted from the youths or other people, and then maybe in the case of married women, because like I say, dark and gray figures of crime, so that may not be recorded in the entire percentage of substance abuse in Nigeria now. So maybe if government or the Nigerian government or other countries can also look at that and see how ethically that can be discovered as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Sadiq, for that intervention as well, which is, I'm sure, taken note of by our colleagues. And all of this, just for the information of the conference, all of this that is being discussed here is being captured into the outcome document that will be, I believe, shared with you later on, and all the points you're making, all the recommendations that you are making. Dr. Sadiq, if I may ask you to mute yourself, please.
Okay.
So that will be captured in the outcome document, which of course is going to be submitted to the CND, CCPCJ, and the Conference of the Parties to the UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime in October. So thank you for that. I see two more hands raised. So it's really nice to see this conversation happening, because again, this is this is how you share, this is how you bring your opinions to the table, and this is how you enrich the outcome of this conference as well. So thank you so much for all your interventions. I see Alvina, Alvina, Blue Cross, Kisumu, and then I see Olatuni also raised their hands. So I start with you, Alvina, please.
Thank you so much, Billy. The name is Alvina. Okay, thank you so much. One thing that I wanted to echo on is the trends or the issues that are rising in schools. Just like Brian had mentioned before, that we do life skills in schools, and I'm one of the people who are in direct contact with the children. And sometimes during the life skills sessions, you hear children and youth reporting of having tried alcohol during this COVID-19 period. So in 2020, when COVID-19 came to Kenya, the president of Kenya ordered that all bars and alcohol joints be closed, but he authorized that alcohol and other alcoholic drinks could be delivered at home. So what could be sold at home by the vendors. So what these people did is you make a call to the bar owner to bring alcohol home because of the social distancing and physical distancing that the government was trying to avoid. So this only meant that we exposed our children more to experiencing with alcohol and other drugs. Another thing is in Kenya, we have alcohol, like the local brews being made in different counties. And you find that they are being transported in different counties depending on what someone wants to consume. We have police have been on the spot for having trying to help or to transport these illicit brews. And sometimes you wonder, like, this is the law enforcer who should put things into order, but is the same person who is being used to transport these illegal brews, and they are being transported in these big vehicles. And sometimes, you know, when the vehicle is maybe approaching a police stop, and then a police will not even stop this car because maybe it belongs to maybe a big government officer, and then it becomes difficult to even stop the vehicle. And maybe they're just during some operations, and then there are these officers from the high level government and positions. Sometimes they insist that they want to check what is inside these vehicles, and then we are surprised to see over the news that alcohol, many liters of illicit brew was caught, maybe with a member of parliament, or maybe a police officer. And then these are some of the things that maybe as Kenya, maybe this is directed to Kenya and maybe other states and other nations that maybe might be experiencing the same, to look into, so that we just save our children, we save our youths. And then other things that we are also experiencing here in our country is the local brews are brewed by maybe people who do not understand the right ingredients to use. Someone just goes to maybe Google. Nowadays you can use Google and YouTube to do your own concoction at home, and then someone comes and sits down and comes up with something that can make someone drunk, and then it is sold out. In Nyeri County in Kenya, we've had cases of people dying, people going blind because of these illicit brews that were made, that are done without the right ingredients, and even hygienically they are not that good for our health. Thank you so much, Billy. That's my input.
Thank you, Alvina, for that contribution as well. I think, I mean, it's fair to say, again, we emphasize this, the lockdowns have brought their many challenges. And I think the comfort of having to deliver home has certainly increased in many respects. In this case, as you mentioned, the consumption of alcohol, for example. And that is, I think, in that context, and you see this in many other contexts as well, especially young people, of course, are affected. And so therefore, I think one of those policies, and I think one of those recommendations that could be made in this particular conference is what should be the role of civil society in response to a government response to that? You know, I mean, what could be the role of civil society in that case? And we know that civil society organizations have been at the forefront, providing support to these vulnerable communities. I think it was in one of the previous CNDs where George presented the very practical experiences, good examples of civil society organizations that are doing such work. So maybe building on that, what more can be done? So thank you, Alvina, for that contribution. And now I'd like to ask Ola Tunie, please to come in here, and apologize for butchering your name here.
Okay, thank you. My name is Ola Tunie. I'm from Nigeria. I work with Global Initiative for Substance Abuse, GISA, an NGO in Nigeria. So my input is from this perspective, actually. You know, thank God for Kenya and how far they've gone, listening to yesterday's presentation, today, and other stuff. But the problem we are having in Nigeria is that we have NGOs that are into prevention, substance abuse, so drug abuse, whatever we call it in different terms. But the problem we are having in Nigeria, apart from UNODC data, we are lacking data. Data is one of the problems, and I can see some NGO are putting their best in place to get some findings and have a evidence-based data, because when we are talking of data, it's not just a data, we are talking of evidence-based data that can help. But the part I'm coming in is that what is a UNODC international body, what are they putting in place to help most of these African countries, especially Nigeria, or help other NGO in getting a solid data that can serve as an evidence? What made me raise this suggestions, what one of my colleagues said about the attention should be a little bit shifted from youth to women who are having problems in their homes. But this is just a mere saying, and sorry to say that, is not, there's no data to back it up. And UNODC, even though international body, they don't work without a data that show the prevalence of what is happening and the incidence of what is happening. So my contribution is, like, in this conference, what are the plans put in place to help in getting a data, apart from a data from an international body like UNODC survey and other stuff? What are the things they are put in place to help all these NGO to engage in research? Or what are the things they are what are the mechanisms they are put in place to help those NGOs that are into research to get a solid data from them? Is that funding? Because I think you know this, you have to look at this aspect, not to implement a program now. Just help this African country, especially Nigeria, to get a solid data. Then it will be easier, or make the work job easier to implement a program, whether prevention program, whether a treatment intervention program in some particular area and something like that. Like, sorry to say, like, for example, my NGO I'm working for, we are just done with a UNODC project on substance use prevention in selected secondary schools in Lagos State, which is a very good one and is first of its kind in Nigeria. But why I'm happy about this is that we are able to do our own research. Like, okay, there is first implementing questionnaire to know where the problem is coming from. You know, generally people will just look at secondary and say, oh, reason why some secondary school students are into substance use, maybe a case of single parenthood and other. But if a research being carried out, we may discover that that may not be the problem. So that's where we are having problem as in Nigeria. They need to help us. They need to help us to be able to generate a data that will help us to identify our problem. When we have the data, it will help us to identify our problem. They can help us to solve the problem by equipping or by raising a fund. After helping us to generate data, then they will now know where to channel the fund to. And then all African country, Nigeria, Kenya, Gambia, Uganda, they will be able to have a solid report or the improvement, because when there is no data, you will not be able to measure your improvement in whatever program you are doing. You will just, okay, I carry out this program, this. But when there is a solid data before you implement a program, and after the program, you gather another data, it will show you the chart of the level of improvement you make, and they will now know, okay, where can adaptation come in here? Okay, what can we do better to get a tangible result if this result is not satisfied, or we are not we don't achieve our desired goal with this result? And this will help us a lot. But by saying all this, I'm very sure a lot of research has been done in Kenya, which help them a lot to implement some program, and they'll be able to talk about it. They have enough data. But to be sincere, like where I come from, Nigeria, we don't, apart from UNODC survey, or we don't have a solid data. There are a lot of data in Kenya, private entity, government organization, and it's being funded by international body. I think they need to look into that and help us in Nigeria and other African countries to be able to generate data. And it will be easier, it make it more easier for UNODC to get data. They won't need more. They will have lesser work to do, because when there is a solid data, there's monitoring and evaluation during the process. They know how the organization carry out the data. It's just to call on many organizations, give us a report on this, and they combine it together again. They have a solid information, and they will just put a little bit of work, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ola Tuni, for that. And again, sorry for butchering your name. I think, again, you're raising a very important question, which has been raised many times throughout this conference. I think the question is, as you correctly said, some countries have solid mechanism for data collection, data analysis. So I think the question I would basically, as you put it to the conference, I would put it back to you is, what can Nigerian civil society groups do to improve the situation? I think that's a question you need to put back to, at least I would suggest I put back to you, and see how did the Kenyan society and groups and have managed to do that, as you make reference to, and what can you learn as Nigeria from the experience in Kenya to improve your own data. Of course, UNODC, as you say, produces quite a lot of data. A lot of it is based on government responses, but some come also from civil society organizations, and academia is very important actor here, of course. So I think it's very important for you as a group also to ask yourself that question and see how can we improve data in Nigeria. What are the challenges you're facing? Is it because there are no resources to hire experts to gather that data, to do rigorous and vigorous analysis within the communities? What are the challenges that you are facing? And we will have, just as an invitation, we will have a number of at least a few side events during the CND that are going to be looking at this. How can data be improved? How can we collect better data in different parts of the world? So Sarah, if you don't mind, and this is Sarah Picker that I'm talking about, if you don't mind, I think we have a link to the side events, CND side events already online. If not, they will be shared with you, and some of those are going to be responding, or at least are going to be discussing this particular question. And within UNODC Civil Society Unit, we have partnered with our research branch to basically come up with a series of dialogues and discussions about how UNODC collects data and what it does with it, and how can civil society contribute to that data. So that perhaps could also give you some ideas as to how you can improve your own data, what kind of data you would like to collect, also based on what data other countries collect. It will be different. It will be different. But the good news is that you can learn about how they did it, and you can do it in your own context as well. So with that, allow me to go to the chat. I think we have quite a lot going on in the chat as well. So I would just make reference to a few of those. One from Monica Usai, who is asking, what is the role of the criminal groups from abroad? And do you consider the harmonization and cooperation also with other programs from other continents, in particular related to measuring of preventive confiscation and social reuse of confiscated assets? I'm not sure if we have any expert to speak on this particular question, but of course, here I can think of two instruments that you're probably talking to that will be used for both conventions that have been discussed yesterday. I think the one on organized crime it was discussed more, but when it comes to confiscation of assets, we're probably looking more to the UN Convention Against Corruption itself. Now, we've had a number of speakers making reference to corruption being an issue. Absolutely. And of course, within both conventions, the role of both conventions is to foster international cooperation around these crimes, of course. And since you are bringing in the transnational aspect of these crimes, obviously, this will be the main instruments for this. And UNODC, of course, is a guardian of these two conventions. This is our role, and to work with member states to making sure that we can provide the technical assistance that they need, but also to work with civil society groups to making sure that they can support their governments in this. It's not a specific answer that I'm giving you because I don't think that we have a particular expert on this in this group. But we'd be happy to liaise and see if we can provide a more concrete answer to this. And then we have another comment from Olugubenga Mabo, who is saying that we also abuse, judicial process. He is encouraging UNODC, therefore, to continue to organize programs that will involve judges and law enforcement agents. Absolutely, I think this is, we're doing this really on a very regular basis, as many other speakers have spoken to this need to build capacity of law enforcement agents around the world, of course, in this context of Africa. And then we also, from the same person, who is also saying that we also learned about the abuse of judicial process. Well, it's the same, it basically is the same comment that he is making. AD Medanim put as well that the investigation of organized crimes remain impossible for journalists because everything is censored by the state, which was supposed to carry out these investigations. Again, I mean, this speaks to many aspects that speakers talked about. Corruption, of course, comes to mind when it comes to this. So, and then Professor Sarah Simons also mentioned that there's need for data, government, ministries, civil society organizations, local universities, research institutes generate data, of course, and civil society organizations are welcome to sign up to UNODC's Sherlock to populate, even update current reports. Thanks, Sarah, for making reference to the Sherlock portal. That's something that I think I would also recommend people to make use of. Many people do not know that they can contribute to the Sherlock portal, actually. So it's not only for governments to contribute data, but also civil society and individual groups can also contribute data to the Sherlock portal. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. Maybe my colleagues could put the link the Sherlock portal in there, so that other participants could also have a look. Okay, so otherwise, again, I would ask Sarah to continue monitoring the chat and see. We still have about 30 minutes. Now, I probably should have given you like a 5 minutes, 10 minutes break, but I didn't. So in light of that, I would probably just release you 10, 15 minutes earlier, if we agree on that. So that means we have another about 15 minutes for this session. So I would really encourage anyone else who has any comment, any contribution to raise it, and to ask Sarah also if there's anything in the chat that I should be paying attention to please alert that to me as well. But this is really exciting discussions, really. I mean, a lot of ideas here. And I hope that our rapporteurs, who are, I'm sure they're doing great work, they're capturing all of this discussion, and we will be able to see this reflected in the outcome document. Sarah, you're unmuted yourself. You would like to say something?
No, I was just going to refer to the chat. We've had a very active discussion there as well, but I think we addressed most, if not all, comments made there. And Alia kindly posted a link to Sherlock also for those interested in contributing there. So please do click on the link and see what Sherlock is about. And otherwise, if you're releasing people early, I just wanted to make sure to also give the floor to Milena and Aline, who will make a quick, who will give a quick info about tomorrow and how the conference will continue.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah, for that guidance as well. Now, the other Sarah Simons, would you like to say something?
Very briefly, just from experience of trying to find a legal instrument to address a pressing problem. I remember in 2007, 2008, when we were looking at ways of combating human trafficking in East Africa. In my work in East Africa, one of the things we found is most countries didn't have a legislation. And my guess is as good as yours that for most of the crimes we're looking at, our countries might not have a clear and passed legislation. So what we look at and what could help you is looking at already existing but alternative instruments that could be used. That might mean that the offender might get a lesser charge, but still at least there is some kind of a deterrent. So what I was looking at that time in the 13 East African countries during the Global Initiative to Fight Human Trafficking, a very good UNODC project, a global project, I was looking at, what instruments are countries already using? What progress had they made in passing laws? And legislating takes time. So I'd like to encourage you just, as civil society members to become familiar with some of these other things. Like in some countries, instead of child trafficking, some countries were using child stealing or abduction or something like that, but use something. And in case of doubt, as a civil society, I would encourage maybe the people from Kenya, if we can come up with a network so that we can all be able to contact each other in case of doubt. That's something I haven't heard. A network of information or a listserv, maybe a repository for some of our sensitive cases, because some of them you cannot put elsewhere, otherwise you might not make it home. So let's work like that, and so that we are a supportive group, supporting each other. I know that East African Police Chiefs based in Nairobi is very open and willing to work with us in the same way that they are working, SAPCO is working with the civil society. So something for us to think about as we go into tomorrow.
Thanks so much, Sarah, for that recommendation. Absolutely, I think it's a unique opportunity for a group like this to come together. So I think it's it will be very important for you to continue this discussion outside this conference and to continue sharing practices, knowledge, information. I think that will be critical moving forward, because also, I mean, I'm not sure if this was mentioned at the beginning of the conference, but this is not the end of this discussion. So this is just a beginning of this discussion, and there will be the outcome document will be a draft by tomorrow, and it will continue to be a draft until it's submitted to the CND in March. But it will also continue to be a draft until it's formally submitted to both commissions and to the Conference of the Parties next year. So the idea is to really take this conversation forward and build on the outcome document, and perhaps to encourage actions in different parts of Africa around the points in the outcome document, so that, you know, as I think there was one particular speaker who said, hey, I mean, in the African continent, there's a lot of enthusiastic discussions and debates and conferences, and people are excited about this. But in the end, we don't see a lot of concrete actions in the implementations of those discussions and action plans. So I think maybe the challenge to this conference is, how can we change that? How can we change that culture of just discussing to moving beyond that and really take actions on the ground? Yes, there are many challenges, including funding. Some people have mentioned there are other challenges, including, you know, a lack of space, civil society space in some countries, absolutely. But I think, as Sarah mentioned, if you operate as a network, I think, if you're able to learn from each other and cooperate and really, and I think there was one other speaker who said, we have to own the problems and the solutions together, because these are of transnational nature. So in the end, I think that cooperation and partnership would be key. So I really hope that you stick together as a group, you form some sort of a network out of this, and continue to share and to work together moving forward. And again, really to keep in your mind that this is only a starting point, that this conversation will continue moving forward. So with that, Sarah, is there anything else? I think there was Sandra was asking whether there will be certificates for attending this conference. I hope so. I think if you have attended this conference, you should be able to receive a certificate from the organizers. So that should not be an issue at all. So Sandra, you can rest assured that this will be the case. So allow me to go back to people like Benjamin and Emma, because I think I neglected you for some time. We still have a few minutes in this session for you perhaps to come back to make any reflections that you may have from these breakout groups that we just really extensively discussed and engaged participants in. So if Benjamin is still with us and Emma is able to join us, I would invite them to the floor to make any comments. And I see Slum Child Foundation is raising its hand, so I'm not sure who is behind that logo, but it's probably George. George, is that you, or is it Benjamin?
That is George.
That's George. But George, before you come in, Benjamin, is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, so we've had very great discussions today, and it is evident that communities are wrecked by substance use and crime, and they're very eager and excited and even desperate for solutions to these particular problems. And therefore, it really is upon us as already people within these particular fields to work with these communities to find practical solutions to these problems of crime and drugs among young people. And I believe that we've covered the depth and breadth of some instruments that we can use. And I understand the importance of context, and I advocate for context. However, we have an opportunity where we are not in a unique position where the issues we are trying to address are happening for the first time. These are things that have happened world over, they keep happening. And those before us already set precedent by developing some tools and instruments that would really be applicable for us in guiding the kind of work that we want to do towards substance use or drug use and crime prevention among young people. Now, the beauty of these tools and instruments is that they are universal. They are not restricted to substance use or drugs only or crime only. They cut across, and we've seen this from most of the presentations that we've had that spoke about, for example, life skills and any comprehensive social influence programs that targeted one issue but ended up addressing other issues. So it could be targeting crime, it could be targeting violent extremism, but it also ends up addressing substance use amongst the particular target population. So it's just important to remind ourselves of these particular tools and instruments. And I'd just like to highlight three, actually two key that I believe are really readily deployable. The first being the strategic prevention framework, which I highlighted yesterday. And the interesting thing about the SPF is that it highlights 5 key steps across our programming work. Basically, what you have is assessment. We've spoken about the issue of data. So assessing our environments, our communities, assessing the challenges, the problems that you're trying to address, assessing our resource base, assessing our stakeholders, understanding who is where doing what. This is something that came up within our discussions yesterday. Then you have the issue of capacity building. Once you've identified needs and gaps, how do you then go on building capacity of the different entities and individuals within that particular community? Then after that, we have the issue of planning for our prevention work. Chris, for example, highlighted the issue of developing a curriculum, ensuring it's adaptable to the local community, and thereafter deploying it. So that's very, very important. After that, we have implementation, followed by monitoring and evaluation, and then going back to assessment and continuing with that kind of cyclic work environment. So that's very, very important. The second key document that I want to highlight is by UNODC and UNESCO, the United Nations Office, United Nations Educational, and Scientific and Cultural Organization. This particular document is called Education Sector Responses to the Use of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Drugs. I highlight this particular document, understanding that a good number of the presentations we've had over the last 2 days focused on young people within the school setting. And I believe it's very, very important for any institution, any organization, or individual working within the school setup to interact with this document and identify ways in which these particular documents enhance the work that they do within the environment. So I think I'll put a link to the meeting, or maybe share it even tomorrow as we go on with our discussions, so that everybody can be able to access this document. It's available online. So the title is Education Sector Responses to the Use of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Drugs. It's a very, very exciting document. So I'll encourage you all to adopt it. So, the last 2 areas, first is the advances that Kenya has made in terms of the policy space and the programmatic space. And just now trying to also advance the data gaps to kind of seal those gaps within the research space. It has not come very easily. It has come through a lot of fighting, through a lot of back and forth. George will tell you this. Anyone who works with the National Agency for Substance Use Prevention, that is NACADA, would also attest to this. It has taken a long time, since 1997, I believe, to now. So that's more than 24 years for us to get to where we are today. So it is a journey that does not start out of thin air. It starts out of what's already available. And when we look across the border to Uganda, we're already seeing some progress being made within the same breath in terms of setting up an institution, having strategies and programs, national strategies and programs responding to substance use. So I believe even for the other countries, precedent is already set by Kenya, Uganda, South Africa as well. So these are already areas from which every other country can borrow and look at how to advance their own course. Recently, I believe Ghana also began the same process. So all is not lost. We have great opportunities to actually advance our policy space, prevention programming, treatment, as well as research in terms of substance use and crime prevention. Finally, there has been a challenge. The last two commenters, both on chat and Professor Sarah Simmons, on the need to have a network, an African network, to continue the kind of work that we have already begun. We also need to be cognizant to the challenges that arise out of these particular networks, because this is not the first time that we've had this call. This is the second or maybe the third time that we've had a call to have an African network. And each time we've had them come up, a few months down the line, things have gone quiet. Probably COVID facilitated that, but also just the kind of space that we work in. And it has been kind of a small corner in all the corners of all the challenges we're trying to address. And that has made it very difficult to expand and go outside. So what I would like to challenge us to is, just like I mentioned earlier when you were concluding our breakout session, is to not look at crime and substance use or drugs as exclusive problems. They are part of a bigger picture. And the moment we start to look at it as part of a bigger picture, then we start finding groupings, local, national, regional, international groupings that we can affiliate with, that we can align to, and continue championing for this particular cause. For example, we have a Kenyan chapter of the World Federation Against Drugs. While it has been primarily about policy issues on substances, it also encompasses issues of crime related to substance use. We have an East African version of the same. We have movements already going on from the Congo region that have been advancing policy issues within the African context on substance use. We have international organizations, membership organizations that are already having discourse on substance use issues. Some are specific to alcohol, some are specific to tobacco, some are specific to marijuana. However, collectively, we are all looking at the problem of substance use. And you also have the same problem, the same movement for crime. So it's upon us, really, and that's really, really important. Let us not lock ourselves within the spectrum or view of drugs and crime. Rather, let us open our minds, let us open our eyes to other possibilities, because once we do that, then, as they say, the world is our oyster. There's so much possibility, there's so much we can do, as long as we open our eyes to those possibilities.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks so much, Benjamin, for that. And I would probably put that challenge to you as well, since you've been, this is a third, you're participating in a third call for a network like this. You must know what issues you've been facing until now. and we're talking about analysis and looking at the challenges. I mean, I think one has to look back and see why that did not succeed, and perhaps try to address the issues from there. If again, it might be an issue of funding, it might be an issue of lack of capacity within different organizations, which is always a possibility. So, and there, of course, I think one would have to come up with perhaps recommendations or strategies on how to address those issues. But it should not be, hopefully the third time will be the charm. So it should not be that, you know, we come back to the same issue and problems over and over again. I think that would be, that's, and we know that this is the case for many aspects within the African continent, and I think that's not a cycle that we want to remain in. So I think hopefully we can overcome that and move this particular conference, this particular network to a successful implementation. With these colleagues, I know I've kept you long. I think some of you are really tired, and rightly so. The attention span, I think, has shrunk quite significantly since we started this session. I would just like to ask George to say just a few words here. Maybe George, don't take more than 2 minutes, and then I will ask my colleagues, the organizers, to sum up. Not to sum up, which has been already summed up, but to give you information about the session that is coming up tomorrow. So, George?
Hi, Billy. I'm using Benjamin's account. Mine, the volume has gone down. I don't know what is the problem. Maybe just 2 or 3 things that I would want to say. One is about the whole issue of certificate. I have received more than 10 emails of people asking about the certificate. So I would suggest that Sarah can share her email address so that anyone who is interested to get the certificate can forward the name to Sarah. Then Sarah will consolidate all the names. Then we will do an e-certificate. I know that will help a lot. Secondly, I'm very much grateful for the participation of each and every person. We are learning a lot. There are things that I didn't know about, and I'm learning. I'm in the process of thinking outside wide and loud. The third thing is we are also thinking how to make this thing bigger, better, and something that will still bring us together and bring other stakeholders on board, because a lot of people have been asking after this, what next? So the what next will be there, and maybe by tomorrow we'll definitely have something that we will be able to put across. But from our end, we are open. If you do think that there is any idea that you would want to put across, or you want us to work on or react on it, feel free, share with Sarah, because I know most of us have been able to touch base with Sarah. So share with Sarah, and then we will see how to factor it in. But I'm very much grateful. So that is it from my end.
Thank you, George, for that. Very encouraging. And just one very short comment to this. I think from the UNODC perspective, it's always easier to work and support networks rather than supporting individual organizations around the world, because it simply is impossible. So I think the more you can get yourselves together, organized, the better that you would also receive support from UNODC. So I think that's if that is in any way an encouragement or an incentive, I think that's something that will be encouraging for us to see moving forward from this conference. And therefore, I think that will give us a better opportunity also to continue supporting this initiative, the outcome of this, and the actions that you would decide to take moving forward. So with that, I really would like to thank you all for participating in this summary session, and also for participating in the breakout groups. both breakout groups, and really would like to thank very much the moderators of those sessions, Benjamin, Emma, Sarah, and let me see if I don't want to miss anyone, Sarah and Farai. And also, of course, the rapporteurs who have been very, very helpful in both of these sessions, Tobias, Angela, Julia, Monica, but of course, as well as Aruni, Ivy, Eddie, and Danny. So with that, thank you so much, everyone, for today. I would like to invite, I believe, Aline and Melina to give you some instructions about tomorrow's session. So from my side, thank you so much.
Thank you, Billy. And thank you, everyone, also for my side, for your valuable contribution so far to this very interesting second day of the conference. Many thanks for participants, for the important interactive discussion we had, to the rapporteurs for the useful summaries. And thank you also, of course, to all the speakers and moderators for their precious input on best practices and actions to address crime and drugs in Africa. It was a very informative and enlightening discussion. So moving forward with the third and the final day of the conference, tomorrow we are starting at 10 a.m. East African time with a brief introduction of the final day before moving back into the two breakout sessions to conclude our discussion on concrete actionable goals for civil society engagement. Looking forward to it. And Aline is kindly sharing in the chat as a reminder the link to the plenary session of tomorrow. And yes, that's all from my side. Thanks again and see you all tomorrow.